Head of Incident Response at Integrity 360, Patrick Wragg.
Cheers. Hello, testing. Yeah, that works. Does that go next? Yeah, okay. So, hi everyone. As Joanna said, I'm Patrick Wragg, Head of Incident Response at Integrity 360. Been at Integrity for about 3 years now, but I've been doing incident response for about 12 years. So, what do I mean by the unknown? So, there's vulnerabilities, there's insider abuse, there's supply chain attacks, there's 0 days, there's all sorts of attacks that you've got to look out for, and the unknown is those ones that are kind of like on the format of 0 days. You don't know that they're there. So I'm going to also go over what I've witnessed. I'm going to go over some war stories, my recommendations, and what I'm not here to talk about is phishing, because it's boring. Everyone talks about phishing these days, and DDoSes. And the reason I'm not going to talk about DDoSes is because although they are a cybersecurity attack, it's quite hard to defend against them from an incident response point of view. So you kind of just got to have more infrastructure. So what have I witnessed? Most recent types of initial access, as opposed to phishing, is external exploits. So we've seen a lot of Citrix exploits, Citrix NetScalers. Log4j is quite a popular one still, even though it was patched about 2 years ago. And a lot of VPN breaches as well. So VPNs are like external servers that have external access, and they're also connected to the domain, so pretty bad. That's why they're always targeted for attacks. So the most recent types of initial access we've seen in our incident response engagements are external exploits. On the rise is insider abuse, so I'll go over a case later where the group Lapsus, threat actor called Lapsus, actually paid an employee, I think it was about $10,000 to get access to the network. So the employee was leaving the employee was leaving the company and then wanted some money. So Lapsus reached out to them on LinkedIn and said, we'll give you £10,000 if you set your password to password 1. So yeah, insider abuse is on the up and up. Also, that's deliberate insider abuse. There's also accidental insider abuse as well. So I class things like leaving an RDP port open, like a firewall change, something like that, like an accidental leaving a port open. I class that as accidental insider abuse. So another example of insider abuse was in Northern Ireland. A few months ago now, where a Freedom of Information Act was made to the police service in Northern Ireland, asking for a number of the number of police staff. So and like what kind of departments they're in. What the person handling the Freedom of Information Act actually did was they accidentally attached the whole spreadsheet of all the police officers' names, where they're based, and what their salaries were, and even if they're undercover as well. So that's an example of accidental insider abuse. Pretty bad mistake. And the police commissioner in Northern Ireland resigned because of that. So I still class that as a cyber attack. So unusual attack methods, hardware backdoors, definitely see them as up and coming. Sorry, Joanna, just the timer's not on. Is that okay? Cheers, great. So hardware backdoors. Yep, so I've got a case study where I'll go over where we've got a hardware backdoor. Seems to be the most common hardware backdoors are from China, because that seems to be where they make most of them. And then the most common threat actor motivation is financial. That kind of goes without saying these days. But there has been a rise in hacktivism. So, the Ukraine-Russia war. There's been a lot of, if any sort of companies are associated or they've got businesses in Ukraine, they are being targeted by Russia. And typically it's not ransomware. Typically it's things like destroying their network and data wiping and that kind of thing. In my experience, time before a company realizes it's compromised, the shortest I've seen is 40 minutes, so kudos to that company. The average is about 2 weeks, so that's the dwell time before when the company gets breached and when they actually notice that they get breached. So 2 weeks is about the average. The longest is 8 years. So, and at the 8 years one that I saw was a Chinese state-sponsored threat actor. So you typically find state-sponsored threat actors will stay in the network for a lot longer than your typical ransomware threat actors. And the reason for that is because they get they want to just steal your data. They don't want to because when they run the ransomware, if it's a ransomware threat actor, it kind of trips off all the alarms. So they don't want to do that. The state-sponsored guys, they'll want to stay in, try and harvest as much information as they can, and stay quiet. Average threat actor extortion, 10% of annual revenue. So what they'll actually do is look up your Wikipedia page and say, right, this company earns, $1 billion a month. $1 billion a year. We'll charge them 10% of that for the ransom extortion. Or in other cases, they'll actually take your financial documents that they've stolen, so they'll actually have access to all your financial data whilst they're in your network, and they'll find out your revenue that way. So you can't lie in the ransomware negotiation and say, oh, sorry, we only earn £1,000 a year or something. You can't just lie. They'll know. So average cost of business for a breach over £1 million. Average amount of data exfiltrated from a victim, 500 gig, which doesn't sound like a lot these days because we're talking terabytes, petabytes, even more. So, for example, the last customer we dealt with, the threat actor managed to steal about 6 terabytes in about 2 hours. So you can imagine it was a 10 gigabit internet. It was very, very fast to take stuff out. The customer, unfortunately, didn't have any network monitoring that would monitor that amount of data going out. So that's one of the things I recommend is check the amount of data that is going out of your data and in, and then compare that to the norm. So, because that could be an example of exfiltration. And then the average time for a business to resume continuity after ransomware is about a month. So we're talking right from when they get ransomed, everything's down, to when they're back up and running. So supply chain attacks, quite common these days, quite popular, on the tips of everyone's tongues, especially after the SolarWinds Sunburst event I think it was about a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago, pretty big. Basically, the attacker's thought on that is, why spend the effort infecting individual companies when I can just infect one that gives me access to all of them, right? So it's kind of like, why reinvent the wheel? So you might as well just infect one, and then you get access to all of them. 3CX is another company that fell victim to a supply chain attack. So basically, in 3CX's case, it's a voice over IP vendor. So things like the NHS in the UK, so the National Health Service, use it for all their kind of ambulance, calling their ambulances on pages and that kind of stuff. 3CX actually used another tool by Trading Technologies. Trading Technologies got breached, then 3CX got breached as a result of that. So, and then the 3CX voice over IP, the threat actors installed a backdoor in all of their tools, and that got rolled out to like the National Health Service and whatnot. So it was actually a supply chain attack inception. So here's a case study we had. This was about 6 months ago. The industry was a bank, quite a small number of employees, so it was quite a niche bank. I would say kind of like a Swiss bank, but they weren't Swiss. But lots and lots of money, massive revenue, but small amount of employees. So kind of one of your specialist banks that deal with investment and things like that. Customers 1.4 million. Again, small bank. So what we found with this customer is that, as you can see in the kill chain there, you got the Amazon sign. What the customer did was they bought these tablets, the meeting room tablets, Android tablets that you put outside your meeting room, and then you book, and then John Doe has booked this at 2 o'clock or something. I'm sure you've all seen meeting room things like that. They bought about 20 of these, and they found that they were all communicating with a Chinese IP address. So we came in and investigated. We found that there was a backdoor installed in there, which I'll show in the next slide, the actual backdoor. And what they did was they exfiltrated about 18 months worth of financial PII data stolen. So PII is personally identifiable information. As a result of this incident, they were suspended from Visa and MasterCard, so a massive amount of business loss because of that, and a Financial Conduct Authority fine of about £20 million. And the interesting thing about this case is, it was bought from Amazon, so obviously really popular, thought to be legitimate place that you buy it from, and B, we found that even if you reset the devices back to factory default, it would the malware would actually come back. So it was actually built into the firmware. On this slide, I'll just show you quickly. So this was the three classes there. So Java classes. If anyone knows coding, they'll know what that means. So you got the ELA class, helper class, and meeting. So obviously, meeting, you think, oh, that's going to have all the code for the meeting rooms and that kind of stuff. What it really had in it was the code below. So you got all these on the left box, at the bottom left box, you've got the domains, so the hard-coded Chinese domains that the malware went to, and then on the right, which we've reverse engineered, you've got the actual beacon code there, so the code that makes the malware go out to the Chinese site, and basically it's like a heartbeat. It says "I'm here" kind of thing. So VPN attacks. I'm sure most companies have got VPN attacks, especially after COVID, with a lot of people working from home. So VPNs are really, really popular these days, and still are. The kind of gist of a VPN is that you have an externally facing device connected to your domain, and add in a set of default credentials and no multi-factor authentication, and you might as well say, "Please breach me." So that's what we see a lot. We see a lot of default credentials left on VPNs, and we also see a lot of no. In this day and age, there is absolutely no excuse not to have multi-factor authentication, but we still see it in incidents. An example of this was the Colonial Pipeline Company in the US, which basically supplied the fuel, petrol and diesel for the whole south coast of the US. This got breached because of a VPN default credential attack. So the second example I've got here was a law firm that we dealt with this is about a year and a half ago now, so quite a while ago, but employees of 400, annual revenue of about £200 million. The ransomware was Black Cat, if you've heard of that group. Used to be called DarkSide. Funny fact about DarkSide is that DarkSide were the group that compromised the Colonial Pipeline, but then the NSA in the US went after DarkSide and basically took all their Bitcoin back, stole all their Bitcoin, and basically put them out of business. And then the DarkSide group, who the individual hackers inside, obviously the NSA know them, but we don't, they reformed to be Black Cat. So that's what happens with a lot of ransomware groups, is that they'll rebrand themselves if they've maybe had a change of managers or change of leadership. And having a well-known name is actually really popular for ransomware. Like, it's a really good, they really like that, because then it's kind of fear, or Black Cat or Lockbit or Clop, you don't want to deal with those guys kind of thing. So Black Cat, very prominent group. We get a lot of incidents with those guys. So in this case, the kill chain was a password spray attack. So as you can see, the spray can there, and then the password. So that's a form of brute force. Then they used Print Nightmare. So Print Nightmare was a vulnerability that came about a year ago, which allows you to escalate privileges. So they use that to get to the domain controllers of the customer. Then they use the little cat there, so that's Mimikatz. That's the Mimikatz official sign. Mimikatz was actually a tool created as a kind of a university project by a student, and then it was kind of adopted into red team tools as well, and then obviously threat actors then adopted it as well. So Mimikatz is designed to steal credentials. So you can hand it, go onto any person's Windows machine, hand it the LSAS process, just dump it and hand it to that, and it will crack all the passwords from that. A really easy way of getting the passwords. So the threat actor did that on the domain controller. So essentially, they cracked all of the passwords in the Active Directory. They created a backdoor, which is that little ninja kind of looking guy with a door, and then the man getting into the safe. That's data exfiltration. And then the ransomware. So in this case, the worst thing that happened to the company was that all of their law cases were made public when the threat actor disclosed all the information, and the real losses were estimated to be, I think it was about £4 or £5 million a day the customer was losing, because they couldn't carry on with any of their law cases. I think they had like 1,000 law cases at once, and they couldn't. All of them were just completely gone. Like, they couldn't use them. So yeah, this company did not do too well after this. Yeah. This next case, insider abuse, I mentioned earlier. So Lapsus Group there, Lapsus with the little $sign. I don't know if you can see that's a bit small, but that's those two examples there. Thanks to Krebs on security, is pictures of real messages that the Lapsus Group has sent to victims to basically say, you know, we will give you so much money to let us into your network. So it's quite interesting that how they're just blatant. You know, they're not hiding before. They're not using phishing. They're not using exploits. It's just simply just asking someone, can we get access, and we'll give you some money. In this case study, we dealt with an insider abuse attack there. You can see on the right, you've got a LinkedIn message. That's the actual LinkedIn message that we saw. That the victim we managed to get from the legal team that we're working with us on it. So the legal team managed to grab that, and that's a screenshot of it. Obviously, redacted names. Apart from the top one, that Julian Perron, by the way, that was the ransomware threat actor with the fake name. So they basically said, thanks for the VPN creds. We're going to try log in now. Bad English. Please accept MFA ASAP, and then your payment will be made. So all the victim had to do was give, I say victim, actually not really a victim, but a complicit criminal, gave them the MFA prompt and put their numbers in and basically gave them this threat actor access to the network, and it resulted in a pretty bad attack for this company. So in this case, the company was a energy critical national infrastructure. I'm not going to say which country. Their annual revenue was about £542 million equivalent, so in the obviously UK pounds. The ransomware was Lockbit, so the ransomware threat actor was Lockbit. Pretty sophisticated guys, thought of as quite professional in the threat actor world. And essentially what they did was the threat actor, by the time that we had been brought in to investigate, the threat actor hadn't run any ransomware yet, but what they were doing is they were in the process of exfiltrating data out, and we found that they were accessing the, OT environment, so the operational technology environment that basically controlled all of the energy pipelines, so the gas pipelines for that country. So as a result of that, we got the government involved. They had to draft in the army to protect the pipelines from a physical point of view. So although they were connected from, the computers and all that kind of stuff, there was actual physical buttons and pipe controls and all that kind of stuff that basically they had to lock off all the computers and do it all manually, because the threat actor was basically threatening to change the gas safety levels so that they were poisonous or so they're explosive, basically. So in this case, it wasn't actually ransomware, as in they didn't encrypt anything, because we got to them by the point that they were threatening the customer with changing the gas safety levels. So in that case, we managed to do what we call a kill event. So we found out where the threat actor was, all of their backdoors, everything, absolutely everything, and we locked them out in one go, one clean sweep. So that's pretty stressful one, that one. Lots of sleepless nights. So my last example is major vulnerabilities. So just 2 weeks ago, there was one in Confluence. So Atlassian is the company, but Confluence is a common wiki tool that you can connect to things like Jira. It's got an externally facing server, so it's vulnerable. VMware, so especially the VMware Horizon VDM, so the virtual desktop manager. We've had incidents where customers have had them breached. Exchange, everybody knows the proxy shell and proxy logon vulnerabilities that were 2 years ago. Customers are still getting breached for them. Citrix NetScaler, or as we like to call it, Shitrix. So those guys have got quite a few vulnerabilities. They always, I don't know why, but it's always December. Every year they always have a new one, a big one. Manage Engine, so the Manage Engine AD audit tool, that has been vulnerable in the past. And then Log4j, which is basically a module within Apache. Apache is a web server in Linux. Log4j, I'm sure everyone's heard of Log4Shell, but that was a major vulnerability that happened last year. So this case study, in this case, it was Log4j. So the customer, unfortunately, it was a education, so it was a school for disabled children. Really, obviously, the threat actors don't care. They'll just go for anywhere they can get money. A lot of the threat actors also will actually publicly state, we don't target hospitals, we don't target schools, we don't target, sensitive, bad places, but they still do. We still see it all the time. And by the time that the ransomware threat actor has realized that it's, I don't know, a school for the disabled, they've already ransomed them, they've already encrypted absolutely everything, so the damage is done. So they might say, oh yeah, we don't target these, but at the end of the day, they haven't got the time to sift through 50, they've probably breached 50 companies at the same time. They haven't got time to sift through what a company is, whether it's a disabled school or not. So it's not nice. So in this case, they had 120 employees, 2,000 students, so it's a fairly big school. Ransomware was Lockbit again, and the impact of this one was that students' personal identifiable information was stolen, unfortunately, and then even after that, threats were made to the parents of the children as well. So because the threat actor had the parents' information, with the emergency contacts, they would actually start emailing the parents, ringing the parents, and saying, "Your school's been breached. We've got all your data. If you don't give us money, then we're gonna release your students' data." So they have absolutely no sympathy. I think of them as rats, but anyway. So this was Log4j exploit in VMware Horizon VDM. Interesting fact about VMware Horizon is that when Log4j originally came out, when it originally got disclosed, VMware Horizon said we're not vulnerable to it at all. We're clean, probably for marketing reasons, but they were vulnerable to it. So the particular version that got breached in this case, the VMware did not say that they were vulnerable to it. They said that they were totally clean, but we found that they were vulnerable. We sent that information to VMware, and then they added it to their list of vulnerable software versions. So vendors do get it wrong. So if you get a vulnerability come out for one of your vendors, one of your tools, and you're like, oh, it's okay, it's only version 7.6, I'm safe. Still, 100% check, because it's not always true. You might still be vulnerable. So, and it's just a classic case of ransomware on this one. So they just basically ransomed and then threatened the parents. So my recommendations are, obviously this talk is about external attacks and insider abuse, which is technically an external attack as well, is you can't always know what you've got, so you can't always know what's vulnerable. For example, the whole point of a 0 day is that it's a 0 day. You don't know it's there. So I would recommend following something like the MITRE attack framework. So the MITRE attack framework has, if you follow the kill chain on that, so basically the kill chain is the different steps within a threat actor's, how they get from A to B. It's the different steps within that journey. And if you focus on the second step, so after they've got into that initial, once they've breached, let's say, your VPN, if you focus on that next step, such as like the behavior, why is this user logging on from this location, or why is this file appearing here, things like that, then you're more likely, then it's better than nothing, basically. You might catch a threat actor in their tracks. For example, I just want to mention the energy company one. The reason that they were found out is because they were dumping a database, and the database crashed. So we didn't know it was being dumped, but the database crashed. We investigated, found all the data dump commands that the threat actor was running, and that's how we found it. So that was the point of the kill chain where we found the threat actor. So always look for suspicious behavior after that initial exploit. Shodan, there's other tools like Shodan as well, but definitely subscribe to Shodan and use it every day. Basically, it scans your external vulnerability. It's kind of like an external vulnerability scanner, but it's free. There is a paid version as well, but we recommend scanning your external networks all the time, because you'll always find something that you didn't know was there. And then on the bottom left there, you've got remote tools. So if you're going to use remote tools, which a lot of companies do, like TeamViewer or Remote PC, just use one. Don't use like 3 or 4. Just use one, and then if you do use one, make sure you log everything in it. So send it to a SIEM or an MDR solution, something like that, because it's all well and good having TeamViewer logs, but if you've got a TeamViewer on every box, but it's not the cloud version, it's just the individual version of TeamViewer, then those logs are just stored locally, and then they'll roll over, and the threat actor can easily delete them. Whereas if you've got the logs going to a seam, then it's hard. Then the threat actors is going to be harder for them to delete the logs, and threat actors will always clear logs if they can. So yeah, pick just one, block all the others. Just say, right, you're not allowed to use TeamViewer if it's not allowed or whatever. You're not allowed to use AnyDesk. Then my other recommendation is the honeypots. So that's the little honeypot there from Winnie the Pooh. Basically, the threat actor's job when they get into your network is to find your crown jewels. So it's like to find your databases, find your financial data, all that kind of stuff. But they are quite opportunistic, so they'll go for the low-hanging fruit because they don't have a lot of time until they get detected. So just make some servers or make some files or make some databases just called finances or something and just name it so that the attackers will go for that first. And then put some fake data in there. Make it look believable. And that's what I recommend to everybody to do, because threat actors are opportunistic and they will find this stuff and they will take it. But if they've taken that, if they've taken the fake stuff, you're not going to get fined by the regulator. So, and then my last slide is, so think like an attacker. How can I get from A to B? So again, going back to that kill chain. Immutable backups stored in an air-gapped location. So the key thing there is air-gapped. Don't do backup replication, it's crap. Use air-gapped locations and immutable. So basically immutable means that you can't change it. So once it's been sent to the backup location, you can't then change it. Know your third parties. Don't be afraid to call them out and say, look guys, we think you say it's not vulnerable. You say your tools aren't vulnerable, but we might think otherwise, so don't be afraid to put them on the spot. Monitor Linux hosts. We always get incidents where the customer thinks, because it's Linux, it's not vulnerable. Yeah, it is vulnerable, and there are a lot of vulnerabilities, not just for Linux but Mac as well. They're just less documented, and especially Linux, because Linux servers are typically externally facing. So a lot of them are externally facing, like your Apache servers, web servers, application servers, that kind of stuff are externally facing. So they're designed to be externally facing, designed to be hardened. So, but leaving a port open on one of them is, you might as well leave the door open. And then if the worst happens, don't stress, just relax. There's a picture of a meditation there. Don't play the blame game. So blaming people wastes useful energy. I've seen it before, and it gets nasty, gets in the way of the incident. Follow IR playbooks, or if you don't have any, create some, because it's really useful if you've got instructions on what to do and you're following what to do. And then in the case of an emergency, call either a third party or call your emergency IR team. So that's it. Any questions?
How long would you recommend to store logs?
As long as possible. That's probably the easy answer. I mean, like I said earlier, the long incidents can go to 8 years, to maybe even more. But if you've got at least 2 years worth, then I'll be happy. So that is one of the issues we come across, is lack of logs, and it really does hinder investigations. It doesn't cost much to just get well, obviously you can use a seam, but it doesn't cost much to just create a Windows server or something like a database server and just store the logs in an immutable place off the network, syslog or something, for a long time, like tons of. Just make it 2 terabytes or something. That's going to be a lot of logs, 2 terabytes. It depends if it's checkpoint or not. And checkpoint logs are ridiculously heavy, but yeah, all firewall logs are insanely heavy. But and that's another thing about firewall logs. Actually, sorry, a different recommendation is please turn on recording bytes in, bytes out, because that really helps during an investigation. When a customer asks us, have you seen any exfiltration? And you go, were you recording how much data was going in and out? And they say no. Well, it's kind of hard to detect then, isn't it? We have to rely on traditional forensics for that then. So,
any more questions? I have tons, Patrick, so you cannot escape my questions if there's. But I would like the audience to get the first up for it. And meanwhile, I really love the honeypot. Thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Can I do that as a private person as well?
As a what?
As a private person, I can do that as well. Like my.
Yeah. Or put some fake credit cards in a tin or something, and on your computer, or Yeah, make a folder called All My Crown Jewels or whatever, and yeah, that would work. Yeah.
Beautiful. I was thinking as well about the. I have many questions, but you talked a bit about the built-in malware in the meeting devices.
Yeah, yeah.
How would companies secure themselves for not buying those types of devices? Are there any lists of approved brands or?
So it's a difficult one because by nature they are. If it's built into the firmware, which is like, when you restart it, factory reset it, it's there still. It's built in. It's really hard to scan and find that. What I would recommend is doing your due diligence on checking those devices before you make them live, before you put them in your network. So let's say you buy 10 of them, or just buy one to start with, and then use a third-party security company to then do some malware analysis inside it, like basically pull it apart. So we did that for an organisation that wanted these PAX terminals. So in small companies, or taxi drivers have these little white credit card scanning machines. We did an investigation on one of them just purely because the customer wanted to know if they are. If they send stuff to China or whatever, because it's financial, credit card information going into one of them. So I'd recommend using a third party just to verify before you actually deploy it as use it in the real life, use it in the real world. So.
And looking at the growth of IoT devices as well, I guess this is what you would say for those as well, that system as well.
Yeah, it's the same. So, not just meeting room, but routers, switches, hubs, all that kind of stuff. Cameras. We had a customer once where they had one of those IP cameras. I mean, they're notoriously bad. They have notoriously bad security on IP cameras, like default passwords and stuff. And yeah, this customer had one looking after the warehouse, and you could see on the picture in the warehouse in the CCTV, you could see all of their like serial numbers of all the customers' stuff, like secret stuff, and it was just accessible to the internet. This IP camera was with a default credentials of just like admin password or something. So yeah.
and all the insider abuse as well. That is, it's people we're supposed to trust in and someone that you hired. What are your best tips to stay safe on that side before it happens?
I guess that's a difficult one to answer because by nature they are it's the person inside that is doing the malicious thing, someone that is already trusted, and you don't know that someone's going to do it until last minute. One thing I would recommend is if someone is leaving, some companies give employees gardening leave and things like that, where they just say, right, last 2 weeks, we're going to log you off kind of thing. But I would recommend if any employees are leaving, they are more likely to be compromised that way through the insider abuse. So I would put extra detections, but basically look what they're doing basically in more depth. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Patrick, for being here with us today. A big round of applause.
No worries.
Thank you.